get it later, then you can potentially sweep if you don't lose too much in the early game. So from Jonathan's side, I think, definitely going to try to play towards that Tornadus, that Kyogre. The fire types are also really important in dealing with the Zacian from Gabriel's team. And from Gabriel's side, I think it's about trying to maybe stall out the early game and try to position yourself for a late game Garchomp sweep, because Garchomp looks really good, especially if you can stall out Jonathan's Dynamax.
Of course. That being said, let's start getting into this match, because as you said, I'm really interested to see how both of these players are approaching this matchup, and I'd like to just get into it and see what happens.
All right, let's get started. It's going to be Incineroar and Kyogre coming out from Jonathan's end, as Gabriel's going to go with that Zacian and the Whimsicott. So immediately Incineroar, putting on Fake Out pressure. You can go for something like a Fake Out and an Origin Pulse immediately to just get some damage off, but Zacian here, kind of in a weird spot. Zacian really doesn't like to get intimidated, and Intimidate's definitely put it in kind of an awkward spot where it just gets rid of that attack drop immediately. Kyogre actually matches up decently well into Zacian as well, because it just doesn't take that much damage from a potential Behemoth Blade. So Gabriel actually does have the Protect on Whimsicott. I like this safe play by going for the Protect with both Pokemon to prevent taking any damage, and it also bypasses a Fake Out from Incineroar. So Jonathan might want to consider switching out that Incineroar if he anticipates to Protect from both Pokemon this turn.
Yeah, I don't feel like we see Protect on Whimsicott too often, but it'll be really nice here in preserving a potential Sash and being able to potentially get up a Tailwind next turn and not being delayed by this Incineroar here. Jonathan just taking a moment to select the move here. I'm interested to see what this Kyogre goes for. The Incineroar, though, is going to be switching out into that Tornadus here. All right. Then Whimsicott, of course, as we saw in the selection screen, just going for that Protect, the Zacian as well. And now for that Kyogre, going for that Origin Pulse to start, of course. A little bit of a neutral turn, not too much happening here. And now that both of the Protects are up, that Zacian getting a little more of a peek of its moveset with that Wild Charge here too, which, I mean, Aaron, I don't think we see that too often either.
Yeah, great points on the Wild Charge and the Protect on Whimsicott. I think Protect's so essential on Whimsicott nowadays just because of the amount of Fake Out users, so it's very beneficial for Gabriel to have it. That Wild Charge, like you mentioned as well, not very common at all, but Jonathan ends up making a really good, great switch into Tornadus, because if you don't make that switch, you're definitely in kind of an awkward spot going into the next turn, where, you will just get outsped. Now Jonathan can put on pressure with something like Tailwind immediately. Gabriel opting to actually double up into Tornadus, but Tornadus switches out again. One thing that's actually kind of interesting about Jonathan's team composition is that sometimes Tornadus on that kind of team comp will actually be a strong Dynamax option. So Gabriel making this double up to potentially cover for a Dynamax Tornadus immediately, and it's a double switch. Wow.
Kyogre not wanting to risk anything, swapping out for that Torkoal. So Jonathan is opting to bring both forms of weather to this match. The Torkoal, of course, is going to be setting the sun, getting rid of that rainy day. Whimsicott just hitting this Moonblast into the Incineroar, picking up a nice little bit of chip damage, and this Zacian as well with the Behemoth Blade. And not too much here, but still nice to get any damage that you can onto an Incineroar when you have the opportunity to.
Yeah, definitely. And, Gabriel's at least been able to distribute damage, whereas Jonathan has spent the first couple of turns of this game just switching out and in and out and in. And I think these are some really great switches, but at some point, he's going to want to actually try to Dynamax. Now, the main thing is that this Zacian has been intimidated multiple times, so it's really not doing that much damage, and Jonathan's actually positioned the Torkoal out to be in a really, really phenomenal spot, right? It can just go for a spread fire type attack, something like a Heat Wave, Eruption, even a Burning Jealousy, for example, and that can just get consistent damage on the board. Torkoal is actually a Pokemon that carries Yawn very frequently in the format as well, so if you're predicting a switch out, you could just go for something like a Yawn, and Gabriel, yeah, making a switch here because the Zacian really not able to do too much, and you really have to be a little bit worried about like a Fake Out from the Incineroar and a double up. But Jonathan, keeps playing with these mind games. He pressures with Fake Out, but never actually goes for it, and just makes these really proactive switches. That's been a switch every turn so far from his end.
It has been. The Whimsicott just going for another Moonblast here, and the Heat Wave coming out from the Torkoal is going to miss that Whimsicott, though. Will connect on the Charizard, but of course, it being a fire type as well isn't going to be too effective. But of course, some chip damage from that solar power ability will start bringing this Charizard down slowly but surely.
Yeah, big miss there on the Whimsicott. Whimsicott presumably has Focus Sash, so, you know, probably would have survived anyway, but that's not what you really want to see from if you're on Jonathan's end. Now, this Charizard's in a really interesting spot. It's not running something like Max Quake or, you know, Max Rockfall from, you know, Scorching Sands and Ancient Power respectively. So you could choose to max Charizard here to deal with Torkoal, but then, you know, is that really worth it? Because, you know, there's a Kyogre in the back. So Gabriel, yeah, opting to just go for straight damage here, doesn't want to max the Charizard. I think that's a strong decision just because the Kyogre in the back is just such a scary threat. So Gabriel, you know, we saw like he has that Garchomp in the back. I think that's definitely the max option that he's playing towards. And, you know, I think he really wants to bait out the Dynamax from Jonathan. As soon as you can bait out that Dynamax, then you can try to stall it out and then play towards your late game Garchomp.
As you were saying, not too sure about going for a Dynamax with that Charizard, with the potential Kyogre coming out, and sure enough, the Torkoal swaps out, bringing the Kyogre and the Rain back out, and we are going to see a max here from Jonathan's end, going for that Tornadus. As you were saying earlier too, the Tornaduses can like have a Life Orb and start actually putting up a lot of offensive pressure, and I mean, this Tornadus is like, he's gonna start doing some damage here.
Definitely gonna start doing some damage. Moonblast comes out, no special attack drop there, and it's gonna be Max Airstream to just KO the Charizard. So Gabriel, I think, you know, sacrificing the Charizard, but has at least been able to get the Dynamax out of Jonathan's end. And so I think the Heat Wave miss definitely made things a little bit more awkward for Jonathan. There is that Life Orb, as you just mentioned, Sierra, so a more offensive Tornadus set. And so now, you know, you have lost the Pokemon, but you've already got a one-turn of Dynamax out. You can bring in Zacian right now from Gabriel's end and just go for something like Tailwind and Behemoth Blade onto the Tornadus. Now, that's a little bit risky. This Whimsicott set is also really interesting because it does have that sunny day, so you can't change the weather. But the Kyogre switching once again on Jonathan's end is really smart because he also gives it a speed boost, right? So as a result, right now from Gabriel's side, you kind of feel forced to actually Tailwind because if you don't Tailwind, you're just going to get overwhelmed by Jonathan's offensive tools. So Zacian comes out here. It definitely could be an option to bring out Garchomp and max it immediately. I like the decision to bring in Zacian. So now I feel like from Gabriel's side, you want to go for something like Tailwind and maybe Behemoth Blade into Tornadus. Jonathan can predict that though. Go for a Max Guard with that Tornadus and maybe just a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse with that Kyogre. So good turn, I think, from both players there in the sense that Gabriel does bypass the turn of Jonathan's max, but, you know, has to sacrifice something for it. And the main question is, can Gabriel basically stall out the Dynamax while not losing too much and then play towards the late game Garchomp sweep? If he falls down 2-4, is that enough for him to come back, or has he fallen, you know, too far behind?
All right, so only one turn of max happening here. You don't see that swap too often. Jonathan has not been a stranger to swapping out his Pokemon this whole match and is not going to stop now, bringing out that Incineroar instead. So bringing that Zacian's attack down yet again. The Tailwind from the Whimsicott. Gabriel just going for a bit of speed control back on his end of the field here. That Zacian, of course, with Behemoth Blade, after that attack drop, isn't going to be doing the most damage here. A bit of chip, but then Incineroar is going to hold onto the field convincingly here. Kyogre will just go for this Origin Pulse, is going to connect on both Pokemon this time, and a really good amount of damage on both, especially since it's not super effective on the Whimsicott here.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Jonathan's been switching out every turn, but that was actually a really smart switch, and I'll tell you why. If Tornadus stays in there, you know, you're basically gambling a little bit, right? Let's say Tornadus max guards. Gabriel can actually double up onto the Kyogre and just pick up a knockdown. You lose so much momentum from there. Instead, by switching into the Incineroar, you also get the Intimidate off, so that covers for the Wild Charge option that Zacian might want to go for in that position. So, while it's typically rare to switch out a Pokemon that's Dynamax, the Intimidate alone is really valuable here, and it works out even better for Jonathan because the Kyogre doesn't end up taking any damage.
Incineroar swapping back out. The Torkoal hitting the field, bringing that sun back out. I feel like you don't see these Pokemon next to each other too often here out on the field. The sun Pokemon and the rain Pokemon, but here they are.
Yeah, and I think Jonathan's actually made a switch every turn of this game, which I can't remember the last time I've seen a VGC match like this, but these are really fantastic switches, right? Like, for the most part, Gabriel hasn't been able to actually punish them really heavily. Moonblast there, getting a special attack drop, so that will hurt a little bit, but both of these are still obviously very weak to fire. And, you know, with the Intimidate onto Zacian now, you've been able to reduce its damage output as well. So, you know, typically it does seem a little bit odd to switch every turn, but I think Jonathan's made really safe and consistent switches, and cycling in the weather, this Torkoal puts in so much work against the Whimsicott and the Zacian alone. And the awkward thing about Gabriel is that he's not in a position to threaten with the Dynamax, right? Zacian obviously can't Dynamax, Whimsicott can, but that's absolutely useless, and you're waiting for that Garchomp switch in. So Jonathan kind of just slowly picking away at things with these switches. He's taking a little bit of damage here and there, but I think it's, you know, not a bad trade-off. But oh my goodness, that's so much damage from Wild Charge.
Wild Charge doing so much despite the Intimidate cycle the previous turn. And we are going to see this Origin Pulse here, and it will pick up that KO on this Zacian. So Zacian is leaving the field, allowing that Garchomp to finally hit the field. Yawn going into the Whimsicott, who of course protected. And I'm excited to see if this Garchomp hitting the field, if it can do enough against these Pokemon that have been so consistently swapped in and out on Jonathan's side.
Yeah, you know, Gabriel's down 2-4, but I absolutely think he can pull off the comeback right now with this Garchomp. There's no more Dynamax on Jonathan's end, and if you look at his Pokemon, he actually doesn't have really great damage output into the Garchomp, right? The only thing that can maybe threaten is like a Ice Beam from the Kyogre or a potential Icy Wind from that Tornadus. So this was Gabriel's game plan, I think, you know, just stall out Jonathan's Dynamax and then play towards this late game Garchomp sweep. So in order for Gabriel to pull off this comeback, he needs to maximize his usage of the Garchomp. Ideally, you actually pick up a one-hit KO every turn, let you have it out. Now, Jonathan can get around this by, you know, maybe going for some protects, going from some switches. And you see from Gabriel's side, he's actually opting for that Max Rockfall into Torkoal because he's nervous about it potentially switching out into that Tornadus. But this Incineroar switch could be absolutely huge. If the Torkoal hangs on from this Max Rockfall, it makes it so much more difficult for Gabriel to actually get back into this game, and he opted for the Rockfall over the Quake to cover for this potential switch into Tornadus. Jonathan does not end up switching Torkoal into Tornadus, so let's see if he can survive this Max Rockfall.
The Whimsicott as well, opting not to go for the Tailwind, but for the Moonblast instead, so there's not going to be that extra speed control on Gabriel's end either. And it's all coming down to this Rockfall here, so let's see. Moonblast first, of course, from this Whimsicott. Will be connecting to the Incineroar and is going to pick up that KO. As you said, if Gabriel can pick up a KO every turn, this could be a really switched game here. And this Rockfall,
is it enough? Oh, it's
not enough. The swap in from the Incineroar getting enough of an attack drop that this Torkoal is going to be able to hold on and get that berry to boot.
Yeah, that's such a critical survival. I think if Max Quake goes into that slot, and there's the Burning Jealousy as well, so gonna pick up the knockout onto Whimsicott. But, you know, if you Max Quake into that slot, you not only get the knockout, presumably, but also get a special defense boost. Then Jonathan's left with Tornadus and Kyogre. So then the question is basically, does Kyogre have Ice Beam? If it doesn't, then Garchomp's actually in a really phenomenal spot because then it can just pick up 2 more KOs in the subsequent 2 turns. So now it's Garchomp against 3 different Pokemon. Granted, the Pokemon are, you know, not exactly very healthy, so I think Garchomp could still definitely pull off this comeback. From Jonathan's side of the field as well, if you don't have Ice Beam on Kyogre, you're relying on actually relatively inaccurate attacks from Tornadus and Kyogre, right? Origin Pulse from Kyogre and Hurricane from Tornadus. Those, you know, don't exactly have 100% accuracy, so Gabriel's Garchomp can definitely still pull off the comeback. That Intimidate was huge to allow Torkoal to survive this turn, but I think Garchomp right now in a position to still potentially just pick up a one-hit KO onto everything because Gabriel's been able to distribute damage across the board. So yeah, it's gonna come down to whether or not Jonathan has enough firepower in this end game. He is up 3-1, but he does not have that much damage output right now.
The Tornadus here is opting to go for the Protect, and the Garchomp will be able to hit this Max Quake into the Torkoal, get that special defense boost, and pick up this KO as well. So it is going to be 2 versus 1 here. I don't know, with the, as you were saying, the Tornadus and the Kyogre don't really have good ways of hitting this Garchomp, and it has 1 turn of max left, but you think it can do enough to both of these Pokemon in the amount of time to close up this endgame?
It's going to be so close. Yeah, the first question I still have is there Ice Beam on Kyogre? If so, this feels like you know, a lot easier for Jonathan's end, especially because this Garchomp actually doesn't have Protect. It has Max Guard, but once its Dynamax is over, you can't Protect, for example, to stall out the end game. Because, you know, you could Max Rockfall into Tornadus. I don't think Kyogre faints from the sand. I think it will have just a little bit of chip damage. Like, you literally survive with probably like 1 or 2 HP. So not having Protect actually hurts a little bit, because right now from Jonathan's end, I think you're going to want to go for a Tailwind with that Tornadus to ensure that you outspeed with the Kyogre in this end game. And then it comes down to Kyogre. If you don't have Ice Beam, then you're going to need to hit your Origin Pulses. So let's see. It is going to be Tailwind starting out from that Tornadus.
All right, Tailwind will allow this Kyogre to outspeed, so we'll get a little glimpse. Origin Pulse, so presumably no Ice Beam here. Garchomp will get that Rockfall into the Tornadus here. That was a lot of damage from the Origin Pulse, though. Of course, being rain boosted, but it still did a nice chunk of damage to the Garchomp, and of course, it is the last turn of Dynamax, so... And taking that Life Orb damage to boot.
Does it survive? Oh, it does!
Ooh, just hanging on here. We'll get the opportunity to go for one more attack here, so I think it comes down to whether Garchomp holds on or whether this Origin Pulse misses.
Yeah, let's see. Right now, I think Gabriel is hoping to survive. Origin Pulse looks like it is going to connect. I don't think Garchomp can survive, even with that special defense boost. It doesn't really have any bulk, and yeah, that's going to be enough. Jonathan Evans wins by just a couple of HP, and what a first game to kick off the winner's quarters. Wow.
That was such a good match. The Garchomp was so close to the end.
I just can't wait to see how the second game plays out, so let's get into it.
Neither can I, especially with the fact that the Kyogre doesn't have the Ice Beam. I mean, the Garchomp could be positioned a little better. That could be a very different end game. We are going to see that Zacian and the Whimsicott again out on Gabriel's side versus the Torkoal and the Tornadus to start here on Jonathan's.
I really like Jonathan's lead mix-up here, ending with the Torkoal over the Kyogre. Zacian can't actually do that much damage into Torkoal, so, you know, it does put on more pressure immediately with its spread fire type attacks. And it also has Yawn, right? So what makes this really tough for Gabriel is you don't really have a safe switch in, right? Like, he's debating about switching Garchomp right now, but Jonathan could read into that, just go for the Yawn on this switch in. Regardless, I think that Jonathan definitely gets the better end of the lead matchup this time around and has some room to work with. Now, I like this Protect play. I like the decision to switch out into Garchomp because Tornadus and Torkoal can't put on that much offensive pressure against Garchomp. And so if Jonathan, for example, doesn't opt to actually go for a Yawn into this Garchomp switch in, then Gabriel's in a much better spot going into turn 2. But Jonathan making a nice adjustment with his lead this time around. You know, the Kyogre normally isn't threatened very much by Zacian, but you saw how much damage Wild Charge does into it, so that actually drastically changes how you have to approach this matchup.
Great. Garchomp, of course, hitting the field, and Jonathan, of course, going for a switch into that Incineroar, so we will see this attack drop on the Garchomp, which it's not really going to appreciate too much here. And, of course, Whimsicott with this Protect, not wanting to take any damage this turn, and Heat Wave coming out from this Torkoal. It is going to connect with the Garchomp here and just do a little bit of chip.
Yeah, you'll take any chip you can get in a scenario like this when Garchomp is going to be the primary max option. And so Jonathan, you know, opting to switch out once again, and he's been really proactive in his switches, and I think that's one thing that's really defined his gameplay in this set. Now the Incineroar comes out. Getting an Intimidate onto that Garchomp is actually such a big deal because now Gabriel really doesn't want to max it, right? We saw how much the Intimidate helps even something like Torkoal survive max moves, and so Gabriel definitely put in a tricky position here because Jonathan makes that proactive switch immediately. Of course, this Incineroar also puts on pressure with Fake Out onto the Whimsicott. Jonathan hasn't actually really gone for Fake Out. Instead, you know, he's read into his opponent's, you know, trying to play around it, but because Whimsicott finally protected, this is a safe Fake Out, finally.
Rock Slide, gonna connect on both of the opposing Pokemon here. I love how you're just talking about the Fake Out right as we see the Whimsicott get faked out. We will see that Rain Jelzy come out from this Torkoal and pick up the KO on this poor Whimsicott here. And now on Gabriel's side, 3 physical attackers against a Intimidate heavy team here. Really intrigued to see what he's going to be doing going for it here.
Yeah, the Intimidate is just so good for Jonathan right now. Gabriel did make a nice adjustment this time around, right? Last time Charizard basically didn't do anything, and part of the reason is because its moveset is just maybe not optimized for this specific matchup. You know, you don't have something like a Max Overgrowth and a Kyogre or a Max Quake into Torkoal. And so Gabriel in a really tricky spot right now because right now the Garchomp's already intimidated. It's already taken a fair amount of damage, so at this point you probably don't want to Dynamax it. That means you want to max the Landorus, and Landorus is definitely a good adjustment here. I mean, it can do a lot of damage, but for Gabriel's side, you know, you just lost the Whimsicott, which means Jonathan at some point now can pivot out to the Tornadus, get a Tailwind up in this late game, and then at this point, Gabriel doesn't have actually any Pokemon that resist or are immune to water type attacks, so Jonathan can actually bring out that Kyogre, set up Tailwind, and just spam Water Spouts, for example. So definitely in a advantageous position for Jonathan right now. Gabriel is also in a weird spot because the Torkoal has Burning Jealousy. If these Pokemon end up getting burnt from that Burning Jealousy, you probably will just lose the game because all of your attackers are physical attackers right now, so burns are super detrimental, right? So I think Gabriel really has to focus on actually knocking out this Torkoal. From Jonathan's end right now, you know, you can protect the Torkoal, maybe swap Incineroar back out into Tornadus, and then back in, but I think Jonathan has multiple different lines of plays right now, and yeah, Gabriel definitely has to read into Jonathan's plays right now, because if he doesn't, I think he's just already very far behind in this matchup, and so if you don't make the right predictions, it's going to be tough for Gabriel to come back.
Of course, Gabriel, as we saw, is going to go for that Max Landorus, though it looked like he was going for potentially into the Incineroar slot instead, hitting that as the bigger target here. Earthquake is going to come out from the Garchomp, of course, not going to do anything to that Landorus, and picking up good damage on them both, but that Incineroar just holding on here and bringing Torkoal down to the yellow to get the opportunity to pick up its berry as well. So this Max Quake, I mean, this is such a strong attack coming out from this Landorus, and it's just wasted on this 1 HP that this Incineroar was left with, it feels like. But at least picks up this KO here, of course. The Incineroar will go down, so no more Intimidate cycling, which I'm sure is going to be a positive going forward.
No more Intimidate cycling, but you know what's worse than Intimidate? Getting both of your physical attackers burned. That's such a critical survival there. So Gabriel going for that double up into Incineroar because, you know, Torkoal's a Pokemon that often will protect in this situation, and very few Incineroar carry Protect, right? So Gabriel's thinking, hey, by going for Earthquake and this, double up into it, it covers for a switch out option, and I think Gabriel was just assuming, hey, Earthquake's probably going to pick up the knockout onto the Incineroar in that position. Once again, such a clutch survival. I mean, that's really defined this matchup. In that first game, Torkoal surviving with just a little bit of HP, Kyogre surviving with just a little bit of HP, and this time Incineroar hangs on with what looks like basically 1 HP. You know, if you get that knockout onto the Incineroar there, the Landorus' attack gets redirected into that Torkoal. You probably pick up a knockout onto the Torkoal as well, and suddenly, you know, things aren't looking terrible. But now the game feels all but over. It's double burns on Gabriel's side of the team. Jonathan still has that late game Tailwind as well. Once you get Tailwind, you can bring in that Kyogre spam Water Spouts as well. So Jonathan making a critical decision there not to go for a Protect, just goes for the Burning Jealousy instead and gets the best possible outcome with that Incineroar surviving and the double burn onto Gabriel's side. You know, I like Gabriel's play there as well. Just unfortunately, the Torkoal ends up, or the Incineroar survives with just a sliver of HP. So these damage rolls have been wild in this matchup.
Yeah, the attack drop the Garchomp took earlier in the match was definitely very key there. Looking to just get an Earthquake down on this Torkoal, dealing not too much damage after this burn here. Just so unfortunate. Landorus going for that Airstream. And despite the burn, does pick up some good damage, as well as going to try and get a little bit of speed back on Gabriel's side here.
Yeah, I feel like if there's one way you can claw back into this match, it's maybe to get multiple speed boosts so that your Landorus can outspeed the Kyogre once Dynamax is over and then flinch with Rock Slide. So I absolutely agree with the Max Airstream play here. Gabriel not giving up, and, you know, even though Jonathan is in an advantageous position, he still needs to make the correct plays to actually close out this game. Now, Gabriel has one more turn of Max to work with here. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan just really in such a commanding spot. He actually hasn't even maxed yet, so Kyogre in the back is just looking so powerful. Correct decision to Tailwind there on Jonathan's end, because what you don't want to do is just give up Tornadus without actually setting up that Tailwind for the late game. Because the one way I think Jonathan could lose this game is if you let the if you don't get any speed control, and then the Zacian can actually outspeed you. So Gabriel opting to consider a switch here. I'd like to see a max Airstream here just so that you give the Zacian a speed boost, but looks like opting just for a special defense boost. That could be very valuable as well in dealing with the Kyogre's attacks.
Especially as well, if that Torkoal can be dealt with, then it won't be pressuring the Zacian here at all. Zacian, of course, finally able to get that attack boost and stick with the attack boost since there's no Incineroar to be pressuring it here. The Tornadus is going to go for the Protect, and Landorus will get this Quake into the Torkoal, and it looks like it is going to be doing enough here to pick up this finally pick up this knockout and get this pesky Torkoal out of here.
Going into this game, if we knew both players' teams, I would not have guessed that Torkoal would be the MVP against, two ground-type Pokemon, but that double burn was just such a big deal because it just limits the damage output so much. Now, Gabriel's still in this with that Zacian. It does have that special defense boost as well, and both of Jonathan's attackers at this point are special attackers. That being said, Jonathan still has the Dynamax to play with. Kyogre's Water Spells will be doing so much damage. You can Dynamax either Pokemon right now, but, I'm wondering if a max Airstream into a Water Spout will just pick up a double KO despite the special defense boosts and the Assault Vest here on the Landorus. I mean, this Landorus really not doing any damage at this point, and so Jonathan's focus is absolutely just on the Zacian right now, and it still feels really tough, right? Like, there's still 2 turns of Tailwind right now, so I think for Gabriel's side of the field, if you want to pull off a comeback, maybe you go for a double Protect, but even with the double Protect, if Jonathan goes for just a max Airstream, you get a little bit of chip damage off, and it means like even if you stall out the Tailwind, there's really no way around this. So my question is basically, I think in order to win the game, you need to hope for the Zacian to survive a double up, get a Wild Charge off in return and KO the Kyogre, but Jonathan just playing this early game really well, and it'd be such a different game if that Earthquake actually picked up the KO onto Incineroar, because then the Torkoal also feints that turn, but because it didn't, Jonathan's end game I think is a lot easier than I think he initially probably expected.
Gabriel here debating on the best plan of action here, and Jonathan, of course, is going to go for that late game Dynamax, finally wanting go for it with these Pokemon, and it will be the Tornadus, as you said, most likely going for that max Airstream. I mean, is there anything you think that Gabriel can really do in this position here? Just protecting and hoping?
I think at this point you're just really hoping for Jonathan to mess up. Now he did go for the Behemoth Blade into Tornadus, so if the Zacian actually can survive a Water Spout here, I actually think there's definitely a maybe some kind of path to victory here, depending on how fast the Kyogre is. But this is even after Tailwind. Here's the Water Spout coming out though. Is it enough to pick up the double KO? Ooh, Zacian does survive. Okay.
That Zacian hanging on there, 21 HP left, is going to get the opportunity to go for this Behemoth Blade here, and surely this will be taking down this Tornadus here. So it's going to be one Kyogre versus these last 2 Pokemon, but both of them, I mean, that Garchomp in the back was burnt and not looking too good, and the Zacian's not in too much better form either.
Yeah, at this point, I think Gabriel's win condition is hope that Jonathan's Kyogre just doesn't have speed investment, right? So it's even you stall out the Protect. Yeah, you go for Protect right now. You stall out the last turn to Tailwind, and then you basically hope to get a Wild Charge KO onto the Kyogre. Now, most Kyogres do have a fair amount of speed investment, so given that it had that max Airstream boost even after Tailwind is over, I think Kyogre will probably outspeed Zacian, but Gabriel not giving up here, because if Jonathan is running, for example, a bulkier Kyogre rather than a speedy one, and actually doesn't outspeed Zacian even with that +1 speed boost, then that's your path to victory. So let's see who attacks first here. If Kyogre is faster, the game's instantly over. Gabriel needs to hope that he outspeeds the +1 Kyogre and maybe crits the Wild Charge. Not sure that's enough, and yeah, there's Water Spout. That's going to be enough.
This Kyogre cleaning up this end game here. The critical hit just for that little extra victory here, and Jonathan is going to be taking this set 2-0 and be moving on.